This goddess fortune frustrates, single-handed, the plans of 100 learned men. And you know that little quote, it's from centuries ago, but it really kind of hits home, doesn't it? Like, it's that human thing, that urge to know what's coming, to try and figure out what fate has in store. And, well, over the years, people have come up with some pretty interesting ways to try and do just that. Today, we're going deep on one that's stuck around. Fortune-telling with cards. We're going to be exploring how people back in the early 1900s saw it, thanks to this book by Professor P.R.S. Foli. It's called Fortune-telling by Cards, and it's from 1915. So it gives us a really cool snapshot of Edwardian-era cartomancy.
Yeah, you're right. It's fascinating how people have always wanted to know the future. Foley's work, coming out right before the world went through those massive changes, it really gives us a glimpse into how people used cards for guidance back then. We're going to look at the methods they used and, more importantly, their mindset.
Exactly. So today, we'll cover a few things based on Professor Foli's insights. Where did these playing cards even come from? What did people think each card meant? And how did those meanings change when you looked at cards together? Oh, and we'll talk about all the different spreads and methods popular in 1915. Now keep in mind, we're here to understand what people believed and how their systems worked. Not to say whether or not fortune-telling works, It's all about exploring the history. So, first things first. Let's talk about the history of playing cards. Professor Foli had some interesting things to say about that.
Right off the bat, it's interesting what Foley says about the history. He points out that, well, in 1915, they could only trace playing cards in Europe back about 500 years. Then he gets into all the popular theories about their origin, maybe India, China, maybe Chaldea. It's really interesting to think that these early cards might not have just been for games. People saw them with respect, maybe even reverence, as tools to understand the unknown. It makes you think about how their perception changed over time.
Quite a difference from pulling out a deck for a quick game today, huh? Foley also talks about the Romany people. They were often called gypsies back then. He links them to fortune-telling, particularly with cards, portraying them as keepers of this ancient wisdom from the East. It's interesting, he shows this mixed view. They were fascinating to some, but also seen as mysterious, even a little unsettling, because of these supposed hidden powers.
It's important to remember the social context here. The Romany people were often marginalized and faced a lot of prejudice. This otherness, being seen as outside European society, probably added to this idea that they had secret knowledge. So their connection to fortune-telling, though based on harmful stereotypes, became a big part of how Europeans saw them.
And the way the deck itself changed is fascinating. Foley talks about how it went from early tarot cards, which we'll talk about later, to adding numbers for gameplay. He mentions a deck from 15th century Venice had 78 cards, symbols, and numbers. Then it gradually shifted to the 52-card deck we have now. Apparently, different countries had their own versions, like the Spanish got rid of queens, the French kept them but ditched the knight, and the Germans, well, they liked a superior knave instead. England, being England, seemed to have borrowed a bit from everyone. It's a mixed bag, really.
This evolution really shows how cultural things change as they spread, right? Something might start with a specific purpose, maybe a ritual or for divination, then gets changed and reshaped, and then, boom, you have something completely different, like a regular playing cards. Makes you think about all the subtle ways things get influenced.
Oh, and the suits. The suits themselves have a really cool history, according to Foli. He says they started with symbolic meanings. Cups were faith, money was charity, swords were justice, and clubs were fortitude. You can still see those meanings in tarot and some older European decks. Then we see the switch to the French suits: spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds. He even gets into the origin of the names, which are kind of murky, like spades maybe come from the Italian word for swords, and carreau, which means squares in French, somehow became diamonds. It's like the cards have their own hidden language that keeps evolving.
That change in the suit's meaning, it tells us something. Those moral and spiritual ideas shifted towards more everyday concerns like hearts for feelings, diamonds for money, clubs for just general good stuff, and spades for bad news. Maybe it reflects how people saw the cards, Less about grand spiritual truths and more about handling everyday life.
And Foley doesn't shy away from the darker side of playing cards. He says they've always been enticing, drawing people in, but also faced opposition. Some even called them the devil's books because of gambling. It's this push and pull between entertainment and, well, something potentially bad. It makes you wonder how people who use them for fortune-telling dealt with that stigma.
It's that old tension with playing cards, fun or addiction. By focusing on cartomancy, Foley is basically trying to redefine them, to emphasize mystery and maybe insight instead of just luck and money. He wants people to see them as a tool for understanding something deeper.
Okay, so we have the deck with its interesting history and a bit of a shady past.
Mhm.
So how did Professor Foley say we should actually read them? Well, he lays out a couple of systems. The first one he calls the English method, and it uses all 52 cards.
The interesting thing about this English method, as Foley describes it, is that it doesn't involve reading reversed cards. Maybe it's because with 52 cards, you already have so many meanings. Trying to remember 104 meanings, both upright and reversed, might have been too much. It seems they preferred a simpler approach.
That makes sense. So every rank and suit has a specific meaning. Foley says the King of Hearts is a good-hearted guy, but maybe a little impulsive. The Ace of Spades, and this is a bit ominous, suggests trouble from bad investments. He even has this short table of card meanings for a quick lookup. Like the Nine of Hearts means wealth, the Three of Hearts means be careful, and the Ten of Spades. Well, that's bad luck, not the card you want to see. It's all pretty straightforward.
That short table really shows you the very specific, almost blunt meanings in this method. It's like learning a code where every card has a fixed meaning, and not a lot of room for different interpretations based on, the situation.
And Foley goes even deeper, talking about the mystic meanings built into the deck. He says the 52 cards are like the weeks of the year, the 13 cards in each suit are like the lunar months, and so on. The 4 suits are the seasons, and the 12 court cards are the months and zodiac signs. It's this whole framework of connections, like the deck is a tiny model of the cosmos.
Trying to find these bigger cosmic parallels in a deck of cards, well, that's common in a lot of esoteric traditions. It makes the cards more than just tools for games or fortune telling. They become connected to the universe, right? It suggests this belief that the cards reflect the patterns of existence.
Now, Professor Foley then introduces another way, using a smaller deck of 32 cards. You take out all the cards below 7. He calls this a foreign system, and here's the big difference. It matters if a card is upright or reversed.
Yeah. Reverse meanings really make it more complex. Now, each of those 32 cards has 2 meanings, depending on how it's facing. This lets you have more nuanced readings, where the same card can mean different, even opposite things. It's like opening up a whole new set of possibilities.
Right. So with a 32-card system, the Ace of Hearts upright is a love letter or good news. But reversed, it could be leaving somewhere or a friend visiting. The King of Diamonds upright is a blonde guy, but deceitful and stubborn. Reversed, he's a much worse schemer. It adds a whole new layer, like the cards have a hidden side to their meaning.
It makes you realize how important it is to pay attention to the details. The reader isn't just looking at the card's face, but how it's turned. Dealing and interpreting becomes much more intricate. It's a different way of focusing compared to the English method.
But it's not just about individual cards, right? Foley has a whole chapter on what he calls the signification of quartets, triplets, and pairs. It's about how combinations matter, and this is where it gets really interesting.
This is the art of cartomancy. Knowing each card is one thing, but seeing how they change each other's meaning when they appear together is where the real insights are supposed to come from. It's all about the relationships between the symbols.
He gives examples like 4 aces. That can mean danger, money problems, and trouble in love. But, he says, reversed aces can make it less bad. Then there's combinations like 2 hearts and clubs, which mean a good partnership. Diamonds and spades together. That might mean a bad outcome because of jealousy. And triplets, like 3 tens, could mean you'll lose money in a lawsuit. It's like the cards are telling little stories.
Those combinations definitely make it more dynamic. Instead of just bits of information, you see potential storylines, events connected by the patterns of the cards. It goes beyond just symbols and starts to suggest how things might unfold.
And it gets even more specific when you look at which cards are next to each other. Foley says, for example, a 10 of diamonds next to a 7 of spades means a definite delay. Or a 9 of diamonds with an 8 of hearts means a journey. It's like building sentences, using the cards as your words. The context really changes the meaning.
What's cool is how these pairings often use common cultural ideas, even folklore. The way we interpret these combinations probably came from shared experiences and understanding what events or emotions were connected to those cards. It's like folk wisdom built into the card combinations.
He also talks about the general themes of each suit. Hearts are about love and home. Diamonds are about money and possessions. Clubs are about success and doing well. And spades, well, they're usually the bad news. Sickness, loss, worries. It's a basic framework for the tone of the reading.
Right, those suit associations give you a foundation for the whole reading. Even without looking at combinations, seeing a lot of one suit can tell you what area of life the reading is focusing on. It's like a weather forecast, but for your emotions or practical matters.
Then there's what he calls lesser points to notice. Little details, like always showing married couples with the king and queen of the same suit, even if they don't look like that in real life. And cutting the deck with your left hand. Stuff like that really gives you a sense of the ritual involved.
Those details add to the ritualistic side of it all. The specific actions, like which hand you use, make it feel more traditional and maybe even more important. The left hand, being closer to the heart, is often associated with intuition.
And Professor Foley gets into the actual fortune-telling methods. One he describes is the simple 32-card method for seeing the past, present, and future. You deal 3 piles of 10 cards each, one for each time frame, and put 2 cards aside as the surprise. Pretty neat and organized.
Laying out 3 packs like that is a really clear visual way to do a reading. It creates a timeline, letting the person see how the past affects the present and what the future might hold. Those surprise cards, they add the element of the unexpected, something that might not be obvious right away.
He even gives an example reading, imagining a pleasure-seeking young bachelor. Foli explains how to interpret the cards in each pile, pointing out pairs and what each card means. He even shows how reverse cards can change things. Like, reverse queens in the past might mean suffering caused by the bachelor's own actions. It's really detailed, so you understand how it all works.
That example is so helpful. It shows how everything comes together. The cards, how they're turned, and where they are in the timeline. It's not just about listing meanings, but how they connect to tell a story.
And then, Foley opens up the world of possibilities with a whole bunch of various methods of divination. He talks about the 21 cards method, which also has a surprise card. It focuses on card combinations across 3 dealt piles. He even gives an example reading for a dark, clever, well-intentioned young man, explaining what groups like 4 aces or 3 kings would mean in that context. It's like each method has its own language for reading the cards.
The sheer number of methods is amazing. It shows how many different approaches to cartomancy were around back then. Each has its own rules for dealing, laying out, and interpreting the cards. It wasn't one right way to do it. Maybe it depended on what you liked, what questions you were asking, even where you lived.
Then there's the selected cards method, also using 32 cards. The person shuffles and cuts, and then the highest card of a certain suit from a few dealt sets is chosen. These cards are arranged in a half circle. The reading depends on the individual meanings and the suits. And here's a quirky thing. Foley says you can link the suits to the person's complexion. It gets really personal.
Linking suits to someone's appearance is interesting. It's like they wanted to connect the person directly to the cards, finding a link between them and the symbols.
Next is the combination of 7s. 32 cards again. You pick a card to represent the person, and then read based on the suit and rank of the cards laid out in 4 rows of 7. Then there's the French method, also 32 cards, but with 2 piles, a surprise card, and interpretations based on pairs, triplets, and quartets. You even count in 7s and pair up the end cards before dealing them into 3 piles, plus the surprise. Sounds pretty complicated.
The French method, with all its steps and interpretations, shows just how elaborate these readings could get. All those actions probably added to the feeling that the reading was special and insightful. It wasn't just a quick look at a few cards.
Foley even describes the Grand Star, which sounds visually cool. 21 cards are placed around a central card that represents the person asking the question. They're laid out in a specific order after cutting the deck a few times. The reading looks at pairs of cards in this star shape, going from the outer circle to the inner circle, then the points, and finally the center card. He uses the example of a fair man, represented by the King of Hearts, to show how it works. It's a very complete layout.
That grand star, with the circles in the center, makes you think of interconnectedness, maybe even a connection to, like, the stars. Reading pairs in this way suggests it's about the relationships and interactions between different parts of the person's life.
And what if you have specific questions? Well, Foley has a section called Important Questions, using 32 cards to try and answer them. It depends on whether certain key cards show up in the 21 cards you reveal. He gives examples for questions about marriage, jealousy, separation, success, moving. There's even a section called Cupid and Venus at Work that links specific cards to romance. It's very focused.
Important questions is a much more direct way to use the cards, almost like yes or no answers. It's less about telling a story and more about finding specific signs related to your worries. Cupid and Venus at Work, well, that shows people have always been interested in love.
It keeps going. There's the Italian method, another 32-card one. You deal in threes, pick certain cards based on their suit or rank, arrange 15 of them, count in fives, pair the end cards, and then deal the rest into 5 piles. Each pile means something different. The lady, if it's a woman asking, the house, the unexpected, the expected, and a surprise and consolation. Must be a lot to keep track of.
The Italian method, with all that picking and arranging and dealing, shows again how structured this could get. The 5 piles, representing different parts of the person's life, aim to give a really detailed reading.
Then there's the master method. This one sounds like a whole system on its own. It uses 36 cards, the 32 plus the 4 twos. They're arranged in a 6x6 grid, and every square, every card in that square has its own meaning. The reading looks at how the cards relate to a specific card that represents the person asking, and how the suits affect each square. Sounds incredibly detailed.
The master method is a super systematized approach, a huge matrix of meanings and interpretations. You need to know each card really well and where it is in the grid. It's like a detailed map of what could happen.
And wait, there's more. Foli also talks about the combination of nines using all 52 cards. You lay them out in rows of 9 and count in nines from a chosen card. Then there are ways to find out your heart's desire using 15 or 32 cards. Sometimes you place them around a card that represents the wish, sometimes you look at pairs. And to end on a lighter note, there's a rhyming divination, which gives each card a little rhyme. Seems like there was a method for everyone.
From the super-structured master method to the fun rhyming divination, it shows the whole range of cartomancy. It could be used for serious guidance or just a bit of fun, a different way to think about your hopes and dreams.
Now, near the end, Professor Foli turns to the tarots and Ataya. He introduces tarot as the ancestor of playing cards, saying it's been used for fortune-telling for a long time. This is where cartomancy really started.
This is important to understand the history. Tarot, with its rich symbolism in the major and minor arcana, is thought to be the original system. It's like diving into a more symbolic world.
He talks about those mysterious origin stories, like the tale of Jacques Gringoner and the Tarot lines. There's the mystical Book of Thoth, tied to ancient Egypt, even figures like Abraham and Moses. And then there's Ataya, a famous cartomancer, who said Tarot means the royal path of life. It all feels very ancient and occult, adding to that sense of mystery.
Linking tarot to ancient wisdom and esoteric traditions makes it seem more powerful and mysterious. These stories, whether they're true or not, gave it legitimacy and connected it to this long line of mystical knowledge.
And then there's Le Célèbre Pétea, who seems like a real character. He was a Parisian hairdresser who made tarot popular during the French Revolution. Foli says Ataya developed his own system with mystical symbols and calculations. Imagine making tarot fashionable during all that upheaval.
Ataya is a key figure in tarot history. He took this old esoteric system and made it more accessible to everyday people. He had a huge impact on how tarot has been understood and used ever since. A true innovator.
Foli outlines Ataya's method, dividing the major and minor arcana, using different spreads with 26, 17, or 11 cards. The cards' positions in rows represent the body, mind, and spirit, and he also looks at pairings. He even mentions the great figure method, which sounds complex. Ataya really brought structure to tarot.
Ataya's methods were known for these detailed layouts and specific meanings for card positions. This structured approach was supposed to give a very thorough reading, leaving little room for guesswork. A very systematic way of using tarot.
So wrapping up, it's incredible how much Professor Foli covered. From those uncertain origins of playing cards to all the ways people tried to see the future, it's a great picture of a practice rich in tradition, symbolism, and that desire to know what's next, all seen through the lens of the early 1900s.
Definitely. Foli's book is a valuable historical record of how people saw cartomancy in the Edwardian era. All those methods, the interpretations, the combinations, it shows how complex and important this was to them. It wasn't just a game. It was a way to understand the unseen.
It makes you think, right? What does this fascination with fortune-telling, whether with playing cards or tarot, say about us? About how we deal with uncertainty and the unknown? Does knowing this history, understanding the beliefs and context, change how we see it now? Something to think about the next time you see a deck of cards lying around.
That's the big takeaway. We have to think about the social and cultural setting to understand why it was so popular. It wasn't just a random activity. It was tied to people's beliefs, worries, and hopes for the future. That context gives us a deeper understanding of this human need to know and maybe even shape what's to come.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the secrets of cartomancy from the Edwardian era, as seen through the eyes of Professor Foli. Until our next exploration into the depths of knowledge, goodbye.